this secret fear that is eating you up inside. You just want to do something about it. For other people say they're worried about their height or their weight. That's what, we all have our things. I think now it's like emancipation, it's freedom from this jail I've put myself in. Yeah, it's like the classic, like so many guys say, is like, why didn't I do this sooner?
How's it going, everybody? Harry here, founder at Baldcafe. And today in this podcast, we welcome Simon. He's been through it all. And he got to the point, as you'll hear, where he was just bored with trying to keep up appearances, and he moved on. He decided enough was enough, and he took a different path with it. Let's jump into this episode of the Baldcafe podcast. Simon, how's it going?
Good, thank you. Do you hear and see me okay?
I can hear you well. I can see you well. Yeah, you're looking good. I mean, I guess it makes sense to start with your own experience with hair loss. So the floor is yours, I guess take me back to when it all started for you with the hair stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny as well, just growing up. So my dad is bald, and a lot of his brothers are as well. And I always just remember as a child, he would like running his hands through my hair, and he'd always be like, nah, yours is glued on. So I've always had this, like, even from a young age, just being aware of it, and like, my hair is going to stay, sort of thing. And there's this whole classic thing of, but genetically it comes from the mum's side of the family. Mm-hmm. And my granddad on my mum's side, he had a full head of grey hair, until his late 70s. So again, I think I had instilled in me of always like, I'm aware of hair loss from my dad and his brothers, but I'm going to be fine, because I've almost had this confirmation, and which we can talk about later. But even thinking about that as well, it's almost like that, you'll be okay sort of thing, because losing your hair would be really, really bad. So yeah, I didn't really think about it growing up. And then I remember specifically when I was 23 and I went traveling around Eastern Europe by myself, and I just remember styling my hair and just being really conscious of the, the widow's peak, the receding bits. Mm-hmm. And I think from that moment, I was just looking at a picture of myself. From that moment, then it's always placed that a bit of like, not necessarily fear, but just conscious of it. And my hair has always been very like fair and fine and really, really straight. So I've never had, like a thick bonnet. But from that age, I was consciously like trying to make it thicker. So whether it's, volumizing mousse, hairsprays, all these sorts of things. But it was a very slow thing in my 20s. But I remember, by the age of about 27, starting to be aware of it more. And if I was brave enough to kind of like bring it up in conversation, it was still not far along in terms of losing it, that people would realize. They'd always reassure me and go, what, are you kidding me? I wouldn't even notice, it's fine. Yeah. So in a way, it's like a benefit maybe of a slower loss that makes it easier to deal with, but sometimes a bit more painful compared to, if it goes all quickly.
You said you're about 27 when things really sort of progressed, and you went from just being like, this is something I'm sort of dealing with, to like, did you become like, I don't know, more and more preoccupied with it? Like you mentioned the different products. Is that to instinctively sort of cover it up, or you knew it was definitely male pattern baldness then, right?
Yeah, and I think just some of the things you said, they're really interesting. Because you're right. When you first have that seed planted, you can't remove it. But also, you're so desperate to cling on all these facts and data. As this is like the fact. This is the data. Like it's I will be okay, sort of thing. And that kind of, again, makes it worse. But 27 it's kind of all blurred throughout my 20s, because it was all quite consistently slow in terms of the receding. But that's when I first went to in complete private. Like, I didn't tell anyone. I went for my first consultation, which again, I wasn't really informed. I thought it was for a hair transplant, but it was one of these surgeries in London. Not surgeries, but these places, and they actually just give you the minoxidil and the finasteride. So basically, the formula and the drugs. And I just remember, and we can talk about this afterwards in my experience, because I've had several consultations since. I felt really young, vulnerable. I was there. It was secret, and I remember just, yeah, the woman who like gave me like the consultation, I almost got, my diagnosis. And then I'd never seen, the camera. And I was like, oh my God, again, I wasn't worried about the back, but even with how their camera looked, it started to look thinner there. And I just remember like at the end of it, I was, had my consultation, this woman. And yeah, I don't want to sound sexist at all of saying women are more, caring, but she was someone who was a bit older. And in that moment, I just wanted, to be like cared for and go, like it's okay.
Like the school nurse, like she comforts you in that thing. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And I saw her because she was like almost like the end of my journey of all the consultations and everything. And I just never forget like how cold she was. And it was just almost like, right, so this is what you need, blah, blah, blah. How will you be paying today?
Oh, really?
That classic kind of like hook in sales chat. And I was like, at that time, I have literally no money. So yeah, part of my background as well is I'm a performer, actor. So classically, no actors have any money. So I couldn't afford it. And I almost don't know what I was expecting as the outcome. It was just that, this secret fear that's eating you up inside. You just want to do something about it. So even just by booking that appointment, I felt like at least I'm actioning it, I'm doing something. But what I was hoping to gain out of it, because I couldn't afford anything.
Just quickly, where did you see like an advert somewhere, or did you actively search out, like, I guess you were researching where you're saying like, what can I do about this hair loss? Or how did you actually get into the clinic then?
Just from tubes and like the sides of cabs. Just classic. Seeing that as like hair consultation. But by that stage, I almost hadn't done lots of research because I was still in denial. I was like, I don't want to have to like think about it. It was just, I saw that advert, booking an appointment, free consultation, then, don't have to think about it until I'm there, sort of thing. Really kind of like not connected with it and, kind of in denial. And I think, after that kind of like sales pitch, and I'm like, I thought I was coming for a transplant, and I just got loads of letters in the post back in the days of snail mail, trying to like, get me back in. But again, I just kind of closed that door. And I think when you do things in private and in secret as well, because you're embarrassed, it's easy to almost like shut that out. I almost shut that out as a memory, like it didn't really happen. Then throughout the rest of my 20s, so I'm just about to turn 36 now. My 20s, if you looked at photos, probably looked like I did have hair, just, a bit of the widow's peak. But I think it was just becoming more and more, for me, miserable in terms of constantly using. So I was just using so much dry shampoo, because you can get these like volumizing dry shampoo and powders.
Is that in like I guess an attempt to make it look like you've got more there, and it doesn't all just like bunch up in one bit and expose and stuff like that? Is that why you would use that, right?
Definitely, yeah. I think because when I talked about I was 23, it's because I had that kind of, the Justin Bieber fringe. And then when you were a bit receding, it kind of like goes into a thinner triangle. You're suddenly really more aware of it. So then just by like kind of like having a bit more of a quiff style. But yeah, you're right. It was just to give this notion of it just being thicker than it was, because I was really conscious of that. And I remember one point on holiday, and I had so much this dry shampoo stuff. So it basically just explains why this volumizing dry shampoo. It's basically like talcum powder. So if you just put loads of powder in your hair, it's going to thicken it, but it's going to look really dry, unhealthy, and powdery. And I remember my mum at one point was just like, it looks like you're wearing a wig or something. Like, what have you got in your hair?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay,
I've taken
product
in there.
Too far. So I was just using all these products, and I remember one moment, I think maybe just before I turned 30, I actually took to a razor, and I'm being like, this is just ridiculous. I'm sick of this. And I started to raise about this much, and then freaked out.
Oh yeah, really? You got really close then to doing it and just saying like, sod it, let's go for it.
Yeah, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm so bored. It's so boring, isn't it? Being this like insecure and like looking at it, because I got into such weird habits that, again, when they're secret, you normalize. So anytime I'd arrive at someone's house, because anyone that knows me, I have got a really small bladder, so it would be realistic that I would need the toilet the minute I arrive at someone's house. But really, sometimes I'd even pretend just that I can go and check what my hair was like, because any guy who's worried about hair loss or is experiencing will tell you, that wind and rain and bad weather is the worst thing possible. Because if I've spent, 10 minutes almost like structuring my hair exactly how I want it with all the products and getting it exact place so I can't see the receding bits, and then some wind comes along and then it's all messed up.
Yeah.
So I would go into someone's house, make sure that's all put into place, and then, I can relax, enjoy the evening.
Did you ever take products with you? Like, did you carry like extra products in your bag and stuff like that in case you needed to use them throughout the day?
Yeah, I've never thought about that, but yeah, always had
Right.
big bottle of dry shampoo. And if I crashed at someone's house or anything, I'd always need that in the morning.
Would you think like, I need to get up before other people and do the hair? Were you at that point?
Definitely. I mean, later in my journey as well, we're using hair fibres, which I'll come on to.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I'd got into really strange behaviors, or even thinking ahead, if I was staying at someone's house going on holiday, I have to get up earlier and sort all these, these strange little activities that I had to do. But also I'd started around that kind of like cusp of turning 30, minoxidil. And again, because I was secretively using that, it wasn't until I wrote to you and said, how long I've been using that. I almost kind of like blank it out of like, when I kind of reflected, I was like, well, consistently for about 5 years, I was using it. Which again, if you keep things secret, then I'm like, oh, how will I get it on the plane, on holiday? I have to put it in like an extra bottle. Again, get up a bit earlier to like put it on, and then, or if I go in the shower, I have to take, if I'm at someone's house, I'll take all my secret little products in with me into the shower and sort it out there. And then when I come out, it's it's all sorted.
To me, this is the real effect of hair loss. This is the stuff that messes you up. So for example, you're like volumizing sprays and stuff. I effectively was doing the same thing, but just by constantly like ruffling the crown of my head to make sure it wasn't like super parted or like, sitting too flat or something. And I would just constantly be like, okay, let's fluff this up, like you're fluffing a pillow or something, just to make sure it's nice. And, and then it just becomes a conscious habit. And then it becomes just ingrained like in your psyche, like anytime the wind blew or something, instantly it was like, oh no, like the crown is going to be exposed and I need to like go like this. And that is the real like detrimental thing that happens when it comes to hair loss. So it's really interesting to hear your description of these behaviors and stuff that you developed over time. All of that stuff, has this like sapping effect on your energy and of your self-esteem and all of that. Why would you think it was like a secretive thing? Did you feel embarrassed that you were dealing with hair loss, or more so embarrassed that you were trying to use these things because you didn't want to seem like you were embarrassed about hair loss?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think it was more embarrassed that I was embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
And again, because I think all these things I was doing in private, if I'd been doing them openly, I think it wouldn't have such a negative impact. And I think, if I'm saying, oh, I need to do this and do that, friends might like, what are you doing to yourself? Like, it's absolutely fine. Like, you look great. Do you know what?
Yeah.
I think you would, even just by saying it aloud, you might realize how excessive all the worrying and these things you're doing is.
But these, of course, are all realized. I mean, we can have this conversation now and share these things and talk about them openly because the head shave is one thing, but you've obviously, like I did, spent time kind of like removing yourself from like what's like mess in here and looking at it from a third person's perspective and be like, well, why was I actually, the first thing I did when I got to a friend's house was straight in the bathroom to check my hair. Now you kind of know like that probably wasn't very helpful, but you kind of have to like really go through this process to realize those things. And then when you do, that's when you, of course, like really move on from it, when you recognize it for what it is, right? Which is so valuable. And again, I think a great reason why sharing these conversations are so valuable, but they take over, don't they? These behaviors and stuff, they really do take over. But I suppose the plus side of that is eventually, I think it gets such a like drag on your day. And like you said, on just how you feel and things like that, you do start to take notice, don't you? And I think that's when things begin to change. So is that what happened for you then? Like these things built up over time before you were like, what am I doing here? Like you said, you were bored of it, which is I've never heard anyone
so boring.
like Yeah. Take me from there then. So you mentioned they're using the things in secret and stuff like that. Were there any more like really impactful things that eventually made you kind of take notice of what was really going on?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things around that to try and give myself a moment of clarity. I remember years ago, I worked with this girl and she was like, "Are you looking inside my ear?" And I was like, "What?" She was like, "I'm really self-conscious. Like, can I ask you, are you looking at my ear?" I was like, "No." But basically, she'd grown up with like having really bad like excess earwax.
Right.
She had like hearing problems and stuff. And that's what she was self-conscious about. For other people say they're worried about their height or their weight. That's what, we all have our things. They're not even going to notice the difference. And I always try to remember her of like, that's like my equivalent of, it's a big thing for me, but no one else cares, because it's always in your world, it's bigger than for someone else. And just to see something that I might think is a small deal in someone else, to try and have that comparison.
Yeah.
But to answer your other point of, when I just realized this is getting so boring, kind of if we skip kind of ahead a few years and some more present time, I started to use hair fibers. So I kind of had an interesting experience because, I did during lockdown shave my head, which I was hoping, was going to be this almost like coming out as a bald man now. I've shaved my head. This is me done now. And this, I think, as well, if people say, "Oh, I looked better with hair," but my memory of hair was miserable. It's just this like dry hay, powdery mess. Just for the photo, it would pass, sort of thing. It'd almost be that equivalent of wearing Spanx, those tightening things you put under your clothes.
Yeah,
and if you stuck it. And then you also hold your breath, so you look slim for the photo, but the minute you like take all that off,
the reality
it's not really that.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. And like you said, people, and probably your mum, I don't know, like without getting too far into it, just so I could finish that point. Did you speak to your mum at all about like the emotional like burden of the hair loss? You had those chats with her before you kind of buzzed it, had you? Okay.
No. So not before it, but I had a really, really lovely chat with them recently. So I like in my world properly shaved it a few weeks ago, and I'm not using any hair fibers, but it was a really lovely chat and they're really supportive. But I think for a long time, they just thought I was being, a bit insecure and like it was all in my head. They're like, "Oh, it's not, you're fine." Yeah. But again, to be fair to them, if I was using hair fibers and all these things, they probably couldn't see that I was actually losing my hair.
Exactly. You know? So that's a really good point. And the reason why I ask is because, so you've like buzzed it a bit, and to your mother, she, if she doesn't really quite understand because you haven't told her, which is what most people do, which is what I did and what loads of people do, then they obviously, a lot of the people are concerned about reactions and things like that, and they will interpret. So for example, when your mum said there, "Oh, like, Simon, maybe grow your hair out a little bit, it will look nice for the pictures," a lot of guys will then interpret that to be like, "Oh my God, like I look terrible, like this buzz cut looks terrible. Everyone thinks I look like horrible." But to your mum, she doesn't get it. She just thinks, "Oh, her sweet little son has just shaved his head buzz it off. Looks a little bit thuggish, and I don't understand why, because why would he do that?" They don't get it necessarily. So then they just say like, "Just grow. Why don't you just have it like how it was before?" Because again, nobody likes change and things like that. She just feels more comfortable like that. And so my biggest thing was, just for the context of this conversation, but my biggest thing was like knowing that, looking at my dad and thinking like, he was never really bothered. He never seemed bothered about his hair or not having it or whatever.
Same.
And then I thought, oh no, like me, like his son, I'm totally crushed by this. I don't want to admit that I can't handle this or I don't know what to do about it. And so I couldn't just like go and have that chat and be like, "Oh yeah, Dad, I really don't know what to do about this. I'm so insecure about it," and stuff like that, because I guess I just didn't want to admit that, I didn't want to like admit to those thoughts and feelings and whatnot. So that was a difficult thing, but it probably would have benefited me if I had just done that, in the long run, but it's very, very difficult to do. So you said, sorry, you grew it back a little bit. You've gone for the buzz cut, which was good. A good little, I guess, easing into it, which was probably, some good did come from that for yourself, because then next time you probably felt a little bit more prepared and kind of knew that you had to go a little bit further, maybe, a few grades down or something. So, with each like step that you take there, there's things to learn from it. So when did you finally, after that, you said you grew it back, and then did you really notice, I guess, after sort of buzzing it the first time, when all those other things came back, like the fibers, the routines and stuff, I guess, did you take them into account more of like, oh, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep going, like doing this stuff forever. Is that what it was?
Yeah, definitely. If I could just answer you made a point before, then I'll come back onto that one. Sorry, jumping. But yeah, just to come back with like the sharing, also to give advice to other people is like, then since when I spoke to my parents on a call recently, it was a completely different conversation. You know, it was a really nice conversation. They're really supportive and totally got it. When I opened up and said, you know, how much I've struggled with this, they sent me a lovely card and been like, you know, we support you sort of thing, you know, really, really lucky. But then, yeah, to be fair to my mum in that moment, as you say, like, if she doesn't understand that I'm actually losing my hair and, you know, I'm struggling with it, whatever. And yeah, and I think it's when people see you with hair and they think you look better, I've realized it's an okay thing for people to say that, because a lot of people may look better with hair, you know, but they're seeing it as a stylistic choice, you know, that which I kind of was presenting it as, you know, because again with the hair fibers, it was this weird thing of it, you know, actually not being, you know, to do with losing my hair, but realizing now it's like emancipation, you know, it's freedom from this jail I've put myself in. That's what it's about. It's not about stylistically, I look better with hair, but unless you inform people of that, which I know is difficult if you're not comfortable with it or it's a secret, but I'd really encourage anyone watching as well, just to try and explain what the how it feels, because nobody, well, anyone that's worth being in your life, nobody would then go, oh yeah, but still grow your hair. Do you know what I mean? Once they hear that, they'd be like, totally get it, like fully support you, you know? And that's sometimes how it has to be. There's no blame either way, because it wasn't blame on me for not sharing it early enough, but it's just one of those things you have to go through. But yeah, I mean, from my experience of sharing it, people, like my parents, totally supportive and, you know, completely understand it.
That is, I got to touch on that as well, because that is so key, so important. The thing of actually telling people how it is, you know, because I've mentioned it before, and I remember when I shaved my head off, you know, hair off, the people I work with, a lot of those guys were like, what the hell have you done? You know, like they would literally be like, you look so much better before, like, why the hell have
younger?
Yeah, all of that stuff. And I was just like, yeah, that's fine. But you do not understand when you have this thing that you're just worrying about constantly. And like, for me to present that better appearance to you, I have to constantly be like worrying about it and covering and doing all of this stuff that I'm just not prepared to do for the rest of my life, you know, just so that maybe you will think now like, oh, you look better before, you know. It just isn't worth it to me to just be like, have this constant thing on the back of my mind trying to keep up this appearance. It's just, I'm not a better person like that. And so that is such a valuable point. Carry on. Sorry, I just wanted to again emphasize that again.
No, I think it's really important. And as I said, now it's almost like my message I want just to say to people, because, you know, I'm responsible as well to inform people, because if someone hasn't gone through hair loss themselves, they shouldn't be, you know, expected to know these things. But yeah, to come back to your other point before, like, so in that stage of I grow out my hair and talking about, you know, my being bored of all the processes, but I then shaved it again. But again, I went back to the same kind of like buzz cut level. So it's in this in between, still euphoric feeling of you know, shaved with all this like really like unhealthy hair because of all the products I was using in it. But again, I shaved it and I was using the hair fibers, like, but yeah, the kind of management around that, and, you know, again, the secrecy if I stay at someone's house or I'm traveling, whatever, you know, I'd do a top up, and then if you do it a bit wrong, or I realize if you put on, you know, a second batch of the fibers, it looks really powdery. And to your point you made before, it's actually Christmas Day just gone. Everyone should be, you know, relaxed, having fun with family on Christmas Day. I was upstairs in the bathroom, you know, putting on my hair fibers. I put too many on. I was getting really frustrated. I'm like, oh, it looks ridiculous. And then I started, you know, get a wet towel, wipe it off a blank canvas again. I went again, and normally I get it the second time, but it took me the third time before I got it. And I knew I was doing it. I was getting myself more and more wound up and annoyed. But yeah, to answer your question. I think that moment on Christmas Day, I was like, I knew at the time, I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't keep this up. And again, it's just so boring. I'm like, I have a brain, I'm intelligent. Like, what am I doing to myself?
And like you said, it's Christmas Day, time with the family. Like, I should just be enjoying this. But it's interesting, isn't it, how, because these behaviors and what they are, like, I'm sure we'll go on to this, but they're safety behaviors. You do a lot of work in, like, you know, with anxieties. They're all safety behaviors. For most guys who are losing their hair, it's the need to hide the fact that you're losing your hair, you know, because you assume that, like, okay, if people know that I'm losing my hair or they see it, that's going to have negative consequences, or people are going to perceive me negatively, all the rest of it, right? And those thoughts obviously balloon off into all sorts of different things. But so these safety behaviors are designed basically to allow yourself to be relatively comfortable in the fact of knowing, okay, they're probably not going to notice this, you know. And they start very subtly, like you said, like change your haircut a little bit, or for me, you know, ruffling up a bit, until they just build and build on build, because you feel like you need more things to keep this secret safe, right, and to keep it from being exposed. But that was the big moment for you, was it, that Christmas Day, the realization, just like, I can't go on anymore like this, right?
Yeah, and I think because, as I said, it's like 12 years by that point of,
wow,
you know, all these exhausted, and it's like you said, all these things start as small innocent things. You think that's not, you know, negatively gonna impact my mental health, for example, but it does, to the point of fact, you know, with your confidence and moving to the back. And because we don't share it, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We kind of lose touch with reality, I think. And we as you say, all these like coping mechanisms, these, you know, crutches we rely on them so much. And for me, the problem is, because say, for example, my hair loss was just plateaued, then in theory I could maybe keep up the hair fibers, you know, or the products. That might be one thing, but the fact you're dealing with that, plus that you are actually losing your hair, so it's becoming more and more obvious, you know. So when I look in the mirror without the hair fibers, it's more shocking. Do you see what I mean? So it's not just the keeping that up, it's all the meanwhile you are actually losing your hair, so you need to probably do them even more, all the things you're doing to cover it up. But yeah, that was definitely a moment where I was like, yeah, this has got to stop.
But you mentioned like hair loss, the hair system consultations and things like that. So were you still, you know, thinking about these things, maybe a hair transplant as well? Or was it just you deciding on the hair system maybe?
Yeah. So I'll talk through my appointments that I've had, because I think it's all quite interesting. I want to hear your thoughts on it as well. But again, I had that when I was 27, and I kind of went back in my hole. Then when I was early 30s, I had one in London. And again, it just didn't feel right. And it was mainly the money as well. I was like, there's no way I can afford it. But most recently, because I live in Manchester now, and I had one here, I think it was either before Christmas or after. So really, really recently. And I had the classic, you know, the guy was like, I'm not a salesman. I'm not here to, you know, be a salesperson. I'm like, you're totally a salesperson. Even saying that makes you a salesperson. But anyway, I remember just again, had the camera that goes on your head. And so, yeah, I went there, and I remember I was almost like on a different planet. I was just completely zoned out of like, what is this man talking about? It's such a inhumane thing. And again, just showing me that, like, where I did have hair ducts, he's like, they're gone. Those ones you had here, they're gone. You can't save those. It's like, you know, the fear inducing. And these ones here, he'll show me, you know, at the back there, I could potentially save those, but I've got to act quick. Basically, he was saying all this of like, oh, I've just had that. So, you know, in 2 months' time, it would look like this. In that moment, I was like, I'm exhausted already for these last 12 years of like, I cannot be, you know, 20 years down the line, say his age, and this still being a thing. I just looked at him exhausted of like, oh, I can't keep this up.
That was probably the moment that you realized, like, maybe this route isn't gonna solve what I feel like is the problem here, right?
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. For me, I was like, no, mentally it's exhausting. It will never end. So I completely agree with that. And yeah, I left there, and I knew deep down, I was like, I just felt like it wasn't my character trait. For me, it didn't feel empowering to go down that route. And again, there's no judgment, or, you know, I stay open-minded, maybe I will in the future. But in that moment, I was like, this doesn't feel right for me. You know, this won't be empowering. I'll probably end up feeling worse if I go down that route.
Yeah.
So I kind of, like put that idea to bed. And then I got onto this idea of hair systems. And I always remembered, because I saw your interview with Paul, I can't remember his surname.
Oh, yeah, Paul
but
Bowen,
basically,
the lad by
Paul Bowen, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a consultation. And basically, because I'd been, shaving my head, but with the hair fibers, I went for consultation, but my hair was too short, basically, and they have to has to be longer to color match it. So I had to go into that's all right, the hard process of growing it out, which I've watched quite a few of your videos actually about like growing out and that, and empowered me a bit more to like, it's okay to have that, but still like the hair fibers as it gets bigger. And again, I went down to see friends in London on a night out, and I was thinking about, oh God, my hair's so like bad at the moment because it's so obvious when I put so many hair fibers on. I was like, maybe I can go out with a hat on. Again, ridiculous. I'm planning ahead rather than like, who will I see? What fun will I have? It's more just a case of my hair.
Yeah.
Hair management. Yeah. So that was a really interesting time. So when I had that first consultation, because basically I had to go out for a month. And then I wasn't sure of that consultation, but then I watched your interview with Paul. I remember just his outlook on everything was just, I think we even said this is the best way to have a hair system or just to approach hair loss, because I think that it kind of suits my character trait. In other areas of my life, I'm generally positive person. I'm, silly, like lighthearted, take, mick out of things and myself. So it kind of doesn't sit right with me to be this kind of like needy, insecure person. Do you know what I mean? Like seeing someone like him, he really resonated to me because I was like, okay, if I do this, it's got to be done with this approach of being really open with it, having fun with it, not take it too seriously. And it was just, I was watching it and it's quite late at night, and I was like, I'll just watch like 10 minutes, and I ended up watching the whole hour and a half, whatever, like late into the night, because I just loved it, and all your content as well. That's when I was just started watching it like almost every video, because it was really giving me that positive boost. Because I was like, even though yes, I'm not going to shave my head and be bald, it was really important for me to go with this approach for a hair system. So I started doing all this work on myself, and literally then I realized without realizing, I was becoming more obsessed with this idea. And I was like, and then, I'm going to be so happy. I know in the summer, I'm going to have this like thick hair that I've never had before. And like when I meet people, they're like, oh my God, I thought you were so much younger. Like, and, I'm just going to look so great. And, I also do acting. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll get more acting roles and for like younger roles. And it wasn't until I had that second consultation, which was basically like my hair had been long enough. I had like the color match, and it's basically like, are you ready to like sign on the dotted line sort of thing? But I just had this moment. It was almost like quite clear. I was just walking back along the canal, and I was like, I can't do it. It's like I realized that I've put so much expectation on this wig, because essentially, it's you call it a hair system, but it's a wig glued onto a head. I was putting so much expectation on this wig, solving everything, reversing time, making me look younger, and all the worries I had before, and I'll suddenly be confident, in terms of dating and how I look. And I was like, that is really dangerous. Like, because what happens if it's not, and I'm a very, I'm such a pernickety perfectionist sort of person, because even in my consultation, I was really honest. I was like, went through their Instagram, and I was just like, I don't want that. That guy looks like he's got a wig. Absolutely not. And I think even on that second consultation, I saw a guy that worked there and a customer who were maybe like early 50s. And both of them, I was like, oh God, they've just so obviously got wigs on. It was just like such thick, luscious, like basically just the hair looked too young for them.
Too much,
I was more aware of them. With someone like Paul's, was really good. And I'm still open-minded to it in the future, maybe. But in that moment, I realized I was just trying to transition from kind of hiding with all the hair fibers to, even though I was going to be really open with people who say it's a wig, there was still this element of trying to avoid the inevitable, which was, shaving it off and not using hair fibers and kind of just fully accepting it. And that was all done in like less than 24 hours of going, like, I'm going to do this. I'm so excited. I'm still so positive about it. To then being like, complete opposite of being like, actually, no, I'm not at all.
Yeah. And obviously you said that walk along the canal allowed you that time to really, I guess, ask yourself that question, like, could you really confidently pull it off, pull it off? And what if someone asked you about it, would you be able to confidently stand there and be like, yeah, it's fake hair? And so when I look at the guys like Paul and other people who are wearing the hair system and they wear it like that, I can see no other way that you can really enjoy it, and get all the benefits out of it, unless you are prepared for that. I think it's the only way to do it. You've really got to like I'm the guy that wears a wig and enjoys it. Otherwise, just, it just doesn't work. I just don't see it working any other way.
Yeah. And I remember you like saying it. I think you did a separate video of like, this is like how you do it. And I completely agree as well. And I don't judge anyone about any route they take, whether it's hair transplant or a wig or the tattooing, because it's what feels right for you. Totally. And I think, and it's part of it as well, say with Paul's journey, because he lost his hair, from my understanding watching the videos, way younger, like in his early 20s, and he was still like late 20s when he was on first dates. And I can understand that more. And I think for my part was I almost was unwilling to accept, the aging process. And I'm like, I'm mid-30s. Like, this is a completely reasonable age. I'm not like some of these guys. When that must be, really difficult. I was watching one of the videos with the guy who was like 16 when he first noticed it. So it's perfectly okay age as well to not have to do it. But I think, and again with Paul's journey, he lived life as a bald man first, and I think there's something really powerful about that, because I'm open-minded, maybe in like a year's time, it'll be fun. The same way girls play with like, wigs, hair extensions, weaves, they can, change their identity, can have fun with it. It would be fun, if I had like curly hair, blonde hair, like have some fun with it. But knowing that everyone who knows me knows that I'm, have thin hair, bald head, and that it is purely a wig to have fun, play with it.
Yeah, and a bonus.
That I know that. Yeah, and if I can't afford it anymore, which I wouldn't be able to because it's not sustainable, just did it for a few months. Then when I take it off, I'm fully comfortable with what's underneath because I've exposed it and I've got used to it. And I think same with Paul. That's what's so important, because I think what I was trying to do, literally go from the hiding, as you said, from hair fibers to this, for me would be psychologically not great, because it's not fully accepting what's underneath.
It would have come from a place of like really needing it for you to feel secure in yourself, and that's like you said, that's dangerous. Whereas the opposite of like doing it because it's fun and it's something new and whatever, you're going to get so much more out of it like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not just going to be doing it and spending the money on whatever just to try to like paper over like broken like self-esteem issues. You're going to be getting so much more out of it. And I think that for any guy who's like choosing to do something with the hair loss, if you can be just like totally comfortable first with the fact that this is happening, you're losing your hair, if the worst case scenario you have a shaved head or whatever, and you're totally okay with that, anything after that is a pure bonus, rather than just like you said, clinging onto the youth or staying the same, trying to avoid change. It just becomes this mess, that is not a nice place to live in. So again, I guess it comes down to self-awareness and those lonely walks along canals and things like that, where you really kind of, you know what I mean though, where you really ask yourself, like, okay, Simon, like, what are we doing here? Like, do we really need to do this? Like, that's important to really ask yourself these things.
They say like you need to hit rock bottom before you can like, build yourself back up. And not that I don't talk about this as a rock bottom, not at all. But I mean, in terms of the rock bottom, in terms of a hair loss sense, is by shaving all off and accepting it. You almost need to fully go there to then build yourself back up. And I think that's just such an important way to approach whatever happens next.
Where are you now then, from when that, let's say, that hair system consultation to now? How have things kind of progressed from there?
So I think since I realized about the second hair consultation, I was like, actually, I'm not going to do this. I then shaved my head, and I initially did my original grade. I think it's like grade 4.5. And then I was like, oh no, I need to commit to this. And I went down to, I think it's like 2.5.
Yep.
And I remember just seeing, so it's winter and I'm so pale, just so much white, just suddenly like so much skin. And I was like, I'm not sure. And it was a bit of an anticlimax, if I'm honest, because I think I'd already had these like pre-shaving experiences. It wasn't, from having long hair to a lot of guys, and it's a full shave, because I'd already had that like adrenaline rush before. So I was a bit like, I'm not really sure, but like didn't think much of it. And then I was like, right, I want to go into town and treat myself to something, because this is, a big thing. It was Saturday morning, and I went to go and get a hat, which might sound a weird thing of like, I'm going to go back in hiding and now buy myself a hat, but not at all. It's quite symbolic for me to get a hat and wear it like a hat, like most people do in the winter. You put your hat, scarf, and when you arrive somewhere, you just take them off. Whereas for me, I would never take it off, because I'm having a hat day. It's glued to my head. So I went into town, and then I was in the changing room, and I kind of just like saw a reflection of myself, and I was like, oh wow, I'm really happy with it. It looks really good. I'm like, I was like kind of taken back of like, I weirdly looked more fresh faced, because I'd been growing it out and it just looked a bit scruffy. I was like, okay, it's still taking time, and there's still moments where I'm like, I look a bit older, or it's too short. There's still like a few setbacks, but overall, like just so much happier with it. And it's just so much less effort and energy. And I think it's like the classic, like so many guys say, it's like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yeah. I think it's just again, those little moments are important, because I think a lot of guys will know. It's like when you first catch yourself, you think, you know what, like this looks a lot better than I feared it would, and I think that is an important moment for a lot of people. And then just realizing, I guess, the benefits of, like you said, not having these routines, because when you can't do things to hide it, when it's so kind of shaved down, you can't really do a lot to hide it unless you constantly wear hats, which of course I don't recommend. But when you don't have all of these, like we talked about earlier, these safety behaviors, these different products at your disposal, you are exposed like that. But in that exposure, in getting out of that comfort zone that you've like built around yourself, when we talk about feeling free, I mean, that's what that is. You're free from all of that. And that's when you can just, you take on a different perspective. And again, like you probably recognize, doing it is also a catalyst for changing that body image, changing how you feel about yourself. And you talked earlier about feeling like, kind of like going against the grain on the whole like hair transplant, like customer thing, and kind of feeling like good in that almost slight like rebellion of like the path that you were on is a great thing as well. Realizing like, oh, maybe I don't need that stuff to feel good and whatnot. It's all good things. But Simon, thanks so much for sharing your story, man. I really, really appreciate it. So guys, there we heard from Simon, the ups, the downs, and he's in a much better place now. Now, Simon's actually done a lot of coaching in the area of general well-being, mental health, and he's got a lot of ideas to share. So me and Simon, we're going to sit down for another chat. You can look out for that episode coming soon. But I want to thank Simon for sharing his story, his journey. And of course, thank you guys for watching this episode and listening of the Baldcafe podcast. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.